A step closer to freedom, New South Wales reaches the 80% first dose jab rate. Less than a week after regional Victoria was let out, Ballarat goes into a 7-day lockdown. Fleeing the Taliban, the harrowing journey women and children are taking to reach Australia.
And coming up on The Business, confidence injection. Vaccines boost consumer optimism, but will it mean a spending spree in the lead up to Christmas?
Good evening, Michael Tetlow with ABC Late News. The curfew in Sydney's hotspots has been lifted after New South Wales reached 80% of the eligible population having now received at least one dose. With nearly half the population now fully vaccinated, attention is turning to when the next milestone will be reached, the 70% double dose.
A step closer to a shot at freedom.
Pleasingly today, our state hits the milestone of 80% first dose vaccination. An incredible milestone given the journey we've all been on.
New South Wales's vaccination rate has been one of the few good things over the past 2.5 months.
I think it's absolutely amazing. Yeah, it's the only way forward, and it's the only way that we can open back up and get back to some sort of normality.
I think it's very important for moving out of lockdown.
The lockdown in the hotspots is now a little less tough. The curfew has been scrapped.
As a token of our appreciation for the fact that we reached that 80% milestone.
The vaccination push continues, especially to reach those perhaps nervous to get it.
I'm here today to encourage all women who are planning pregnancy, who are currently pregnant, and those who are breastfeeding to please get their COVID vaccines.
But on the same day, a mother was turned away because she was with her 7-week-old baby.
I'd called the hotline to double check yesterday if I could come in, and I was told there that shouldn't be a problem, so it was quite distressing to come in this morning and be told that I couldn't come in.
Eleanor Hillard was told there was a liability issue if she had an adverse reaction, with questions over who would look after her baby. The state has recorded 12 more deaths. There are 1,241 people in hospital, and the number in ICU has increased again. Cases are at 1,259.
We are seeing pleasingly some stabilisation in the local government areas of concern and some downturn in some of the local government areas.
As the state looks ahead to opening up to vaccinated people when the 70% double dose target is hit, there's concern there's too much onus on businesses to navigate the new rules.
Look, it is a lot on us. It's definitely confusing. As a business owner, I tried to look up a lot of information on Google, on social media.
We will need to seek legal advice ourselves. This is uncharted territory.
It is the government, though, which is charting the course. And despite announcing the state will only reopen to the vaccinated, it's still sorting out how it will actually work and can't say what the penalty will be for businesses which let unvaccinated people in.
We need certainty in relation to this. Businesses need to be protected. We can't add to the uncertainty. God knows businesses have been battered enough without the risk of legal threats for doing the right thing when businesses open up.
And that's set to happen in a month or so. Ashley Raper, ABC News, Sydney.
Less than a week after regional Victoria was let out of lockdown, the Premier says he has no other choice than to tighten restrictions again in Ballarat. From midnight, the city will go into a 7-day lockdown after the virus was detected in wastewater and 4 cases were confirmed.
This wasn't how these Ballarat residents wanted to spend their last day of freedom. Some waiting more than 7 hours to get tested.
We've been here since 11:30. About 4 to 5 hours. We've been doing university in the car.
This is not the news the people of Ballarat want to hear, and it's not the decision that we wanted to make. But if we allow it to get away from us in one part of regional Victoria, it becomes a threat and a risk to all of regional Victoria.
4 cases means the city of Ballarat will be locked down for 7 days. But unlike in Melbourne, there's no curfew.
It's been over a week of likely transmission within the Ballarat community.
It's a blow for local businesses that have only been open for a week.
We didn't really get a great run at it. Obviously, the capacity limit.
It's been a year now since Ballarat's last positive COVID case. So on one hand, a level of complacency may have started to creep into the community.
Shepparton residents will get to exit their lockdown at midnight, meaning only Melbourne and Ballarat will be under stay-at-home orders. Vaccinations are the key to freedom, and they look set to become mandatory for healthcare workers, with National Cabinet discussing on Friday how that'll work.
We'd like to see nationally consistent laws so that our big employers and our small employers can all do the right thing.
St Vincent's Health isn't waiting, making vaccinations a requirement for all staff and volunteers.
We've had more staff infections. It's the only way to go. I expect most health providers will go down this route.
There are still thousands of Victorians stranded interstate with no route to come home. The Victorian Ombudsman will launch an investigation into the state government's travel permit system after more than 80 complaints. This Melbourne couple are stuck in Coffs Harbour and can't get back to see a neurologist.
He has had a few brain bleeds following the fall he had, and so he really needs to be checked out.
Even though today's case numbers weren't as high as yesterday, the Chief Health Officer's warned they haven't yet peaked. He says we could still see the daily infections reach similar numbers as Sydney.
The risk of it getting to 1,000 is real.
Those risks didn't stop the state opposition from issuing a press release calling for lockdowns to end immediately, but it made a mistake.
Yes, I think we should be ending the lockdowns today. I think the government should announce that lockdowns should end today. The curfews. We're talking about the curfews.
Something that might be under consideration when the roadmap is announced on Sunday. Bridget Rollison, ABC News, Melbourne.
The nation's medical regulator has demanded rogue crossbencher Craig Kelly stop distributing misleading information on COVID vaccines. Mr Kelly's been spamming people with text messages containing a link to what he claims is the federal government's adverse events report for the vaccines. Lawyers for the Therapeutic Goods Administration have written to Mr Kelly accusing him of breaching copyright, and they've demanded he stop distributing incomplete extracts of the report, which the TGA believes could be seriously misleading. Mr Kelly has accused the regulator of defaming him, saying the copyright issue was a disgraceful diversionary tactic. A 60-year-old man has been killed after the underground coal mine he was working in collapsed in central Queensland. The man was repairing a roof that fell and crushed him, while another worker was trapped in the rubble for hours before rescue crews could reach him.
A central Queensland coal mine at a standstill. The only sign of activity, officials trying to determine what caused Queensland's latest mining tragedy.
Any loss of life on our mine sites is unacceptable.
During the night, a 60-year-old worker was replacing roof screws in an underground conveyor belt when it collapsed.
It is tragic, and our condolences go out to the family and the friends of this mine worker. He's a lost brother.
His 25-year-old colleague lay trapped under rubble for more than 4 hours while rescue crews worked to free him. He's now in a stable condition in the Rockhampton Hospital with leg and pelvic injuries.
Wish them a speedy recovery, and I hope things work out all right. There's no ongoing illnesses or injuries that come out of this.
A third person was also treated for a medical incident and has since been released from hospital. The mine had been mothballed for years, but remedial works were underway to bring the site back up to standard to begin coal production later this year.
The 60-year-old man who died overnight is the 9th person to be killed in a Queensland mining incident since July 2018. An investigation into what caused this latest fatality is now underway.
It is my expectation that the Queensland Mines Inspectorate and Resources Safety and Health Queensland will investigate this incident thoroughly and with diligence.
Mine owners Sojitz Blue met with workers this afternoon. They're being offered counselling.
And it really sends home an uneasy feeling across the mining industry.
Operations at the site have been suspended until further notice. Tobias Jers-Lewis, ABC News, Emerald.
Cabinet Minister Christian Porter's decision to accept money from a mystery source to pay his legal bill from suing the ABC is under a probity investigation. Prime Minister Scott Morrison has referred the matter to his department to assess possible breaches of ministerial standards. Political editor Andrew Probyn reports.
Once the coalition's two legal eagles, they're now in fierce conflict.
This is red hot.
and it shouldn't be accepted for a minute.
Christian Porter racked up a sizable legal bill suing the ABC over a story about an alleged historical rape by a cabinet minister. Mr Porter identified himself as the minister in question and strenuously denied allegations made by this woman, who's now dead.
They just never happened.
Mere months after launching the legal action, it was over.
My lawyers, whilst they are very good, are very, very expensive.
The ABC paid no damages but agreed to cover some costs, leaving him with an estimated $1 million legal bill.
The point about Christian Porter's legal defence is he did not use taxpayers' money.
But Mr Porter doesn't know who did pay. His register of members' interests revealing a blind trust helped cover his costs.
I mean, imagine somebody turns up to the politician's office wearing a mask, a hood over their head, and presents a bag of cash and says, there it is. That's the equivalent of this. It is crazy. It is utterly wrong.
Labor says transparency and accountability demand exposure of Mr Porter's mystery donors.
It doesn't pass the pub test.
Scott Morrison spoke to Mr Porter today and says he's taking the matter seriously, seeking advice on possible breaches of ministerial standards. A sure sign the PM wants this business cleared up quickly. Which brings us to the central point. If Christian Porter truly doesn't know who gave him the money, perhaps he shouldn't have accepted it. Andrew Probyn, ABC News, Canberra.
Hundreds of Afghans holding Australian visas are still trying to get out of the country. The ABC's followed one family which made the hazardous overland journey out of Afghanistan to Pakistan before being picked up by an Australian military plane. Middle East correspondent Tom Joyner and Foreign Affairs reporter Stephen Jedgetts had this exclusive report.
Packing away an old life full of hope for a new one.
When I get to Australia, I will celebrate there and let in my happiness.
In an Islamabad hotel room, women's rights activist Shafika Sadat remembers the terror she felt back in Kabul.
The Taliban said all the civil society workers, the women's activists, we have their pictures, and if we can identify them, then they will be killed.
Shafika and her grown daughters, along with their young families, tried desperately to reach the airport, but couldn't get through the violent crush. Then militants burnt down the houses of family members. And they decided to flee to Pakistan, braving Taliban checkpoints along the way.
It was very scary because on there was Taliban and you know who I am and where I go.
The family joined a larger group of Afghans also trying to reach the border, led by former British soldier Ben Slater, taking shelter at the crossing in an abandoned shop, curled up on the floor to sleep. While back in Australia, women's rights advocate Susan Hutchinson and other supporters of the family scored a crucial victory, convincing the federal government to grant them emergency visas.
It was incredibly stressful, and we, at no point were we certain that they were going to be safe until they finally made it.
One night, local Taliban swept into the room and separated the family, rounding up the men.
We put our hands up in prayer, saying, God save us. Do not send us back to Afghanistan.
Eventually, the men were freed, the family reunited, and after 4 long days, they made it over the border.
We waited all day, and then God blessed us.
When they reached Islamabad, Australian officials found them accommodation, and for the first time in weeks, the fear subsided and they began to dream of life in Australia.
Today I'm very happy because I can go to Australia and I complete my dreams.
Eventually departing on an Australian military plane to Dubai and then a Qantas flight to Darwin, they're now in quarantine at Howard Springs. The family's journey shows that weeks after the last evacuation flights from Kabul left, it is still possible for Afghans holding Australian visas to escape the country. But the path is hazardous and uncertain. Stephen Jedgetts, ABC News, Canberra.
A mostly sunny day ahead for Brisbane with a top of 24 degrees, a possible shower and 18 in Sydney. Some morning fog and frost in Canberra. It'll be partly cloudy with 18 in Melbourne. Similar conditions in Hobart. Adelaide, sunny and 26. Darwin, mostly sunny and a top of 34 degrees. And that's ABC Late News for this Wednesday night. I'm Michael Tetlow. Thanks for your company. Stay with us for the business.